Hey everybody, Kenny here. So before we get going, I decided to record a little disclaimer just so I don't waste anybody's time. The Path of Exile videos that I post on my channel are not meant for people who play at the highest levels of skill. This is for people who are relatively new to the game and are looking for ideas for how to progress through the game. So these will mostly be kind of builds that are good for people leveling through Acts 1 through 5. And this league, I'll be changing things up a little bit and also doing some builds that would be good for builds that would go from Act 6 through the end of the game. But just a couple of each of those. That's all I'm doing this league. And also, I don't use Path of Building. That's not a part of my process. I might post a link in the description with an unlisted video showing what my actual process is for creating builds for anyone who's interested in how I do that. Other than that, I don't want to keep any of you here who aren't interested in that kind of content here any longer than you need to be. So you're stopping by, and those of you who are still here, let's get going. And with that introduction out of the way, I'd like to introduce you all to my Golemancer build. This is a much higher level build than I normally show in my channel. The reason for that is at the end of last league, I guess it was the end of last league. I was pretty sure that this was going to be the final league of Path of Exile. So in case it was, I decided to level a few of my characters up to kind of maps level, so I could do some kind of comparison builds throughout the new league, where I do, on Mondays I do a part 1 build, so leveling from Acts 1 through 5 type build, and then on Fridays put out a leveling from Acts 6 through 10 type build. And then it turned out that, we're still almost a year out from Path of Exile 2, but the work was done. I already decided on what I wanted to do, so here we are. This is a very interesting build so I am using a kind of build enabling unique, but it's only build enabling because of the new the new blessing gem that was added this league. So for Guardian's Blessing, as you may have noticed in there, I was running 3 Chaos Golems, and the reason I was running 3 is that the way Guardian's Blessing works is whatever minion is being supported by it, whenever the connected aura is active, they take a percentage of their health per second as physical damage. So there's not really any kind of mitigating that. So instead of trying to mitigate it at all, what I decided was to kind of have a loop going of of Chaos Golems, which is why you usually see 3 up. But what I didn't expect is that it would actually turn into a loop. So it didn't happen too often in the footage that was up before I started explaining just now. But if you get your timings on right, then you can actually just keep your blessing going indefinitely, which is kind of fun. For the blessing, I was using haste as the aura that is connected to the Guardian's Blessing. As with all blessings, you can only have 1 at a time, so you can't have a Guardian's Blessing and an Eternal Blessing and I don't remember the name of the other one, but the one that makes it cost mana. You can't have each of the blessing types. You can only have 1 blessing, regardless of the type of blessing it is. And because I am running golems as my main form of minions, I was able to bring in the Primordial Chain, which is a unique that increases our maximum number of summoned golems to 3 on top of whatever your current max is. And since, as I mentioned, this is a Golemancer build, in the Ascendancy, I got Liege of the Primordial, which gives us an additional summoned golem, and Elemancer, which gives us another summoned golem. And of course, since I grabbed those, I also went over and got Golem Commander, which gives us another summoned golem. So we can have a maximum of 7 summoned golems. And obviously, if you don't have this unique, then you don't need to run Guardian's Blessing. I'm only using Guardian's Blessing because I happened to find this during the league, during last league, and I was like, I was planning on doing a Golemancer build anyway, and this happened to drop. So it was fated. Mind you, there are drawbacks to this. Your golems deal less damage, and they have less health, and less is a multiplier, so it's a devastating hit to their damage and life. But having all those golems up is very cool, as you saw. And you have all of these little guys going and doing all kinds of stuff. And each of them have a they have their own little benefits. So the Salmon Chaos Golem, these guys reduce everyone's physical damage taken. Our Stone Golem is giving everyone life regen. Our Lightning Golem is giving everyone increased attack and cast speed. Our Flame Golem is increasing everyone's damage. Our Ice Golem is increasing everyone's crit chance and accuracy. On top of that, I'm running Vitality and Clarity for additional regen to everyone and to give myself a little extra mana to keep myself topped off. And then our skill build here, we can see I also went for this cluster here. So I grabbed the Reservation Efficiency for Heralds and Presage, which gives us not only a very large amount of reservation efficiency for our Herald skills, but also a very large increase to the area effect of the skills, and also the buff effects and Discord Artisan, which gives us a very large increase to our Herald buff effects, and also makes it that we have increased damage for each Herald affecting us. So we are using Herald of Ice and Herald of Ash. And I also grabbed the Reservation Mastery that makes it that we have increased damage for each aura or herald affecting us. And since we're running essentially 5 auras whenever our blessing is up, I assume that blessing actually does count for this. I haven't actually looked to make sure, but I assume it does. Aside from that, I've done some irregular stuff with how I set this character up. You can see I went for this intelligence cluster here. So just grabbed a bunch of the intelligence, made it that we have 8% increase intelligence, and grabbed the attribute mastery that increases our damage per 5 of our lowest attribute. I head over this way to grab some life and more stats, and also I grabbed the elemental overload, which makes it that our critical strikes can't deal extra damage, but our elemental damage is increased by 40% anytime after we deal, well, for 4 seconds after we've dealt a critical strike. And pass back through here for some more life and mana, some extra resistances, some extra stats, more spell damage, which we're not really using spell damage, so it's really more for just for the stats. Head over this way for the life and energy shield. More life and energy shield here. Went into the shadow area for more life, more damage, more attack speed, damage here, some life energy shield on kill, some spell suppress, some energy shield, some life, some increased movement speed and dexterity, more life and some life on kill. Down here, more stats, more some evasion and energy shield, more evasion and life here. Grab the evasion mastery that increases our evasion if we've been hit recently. Went into this accuracy cluster that gives us more accuracy and critical strike chance, so we can trigger our elemental overload more often. Also grab the accuracy mastery that increases our accuracy based on our intelligence. And a very important, and I don't like saying this is important, but like I feel that, you know, once you're past the hump, you know, like if you're leveling Act 6 through Act 10, and regardless if you plan on going further, just leveling through that part of the game, if you are playing a character that happens to be near a mark node cluster here, like doesn't matter which one you're going for, you know, if you're playing a ranger, a scion, a duelist, and you happen to be moving near this one here, he's here, this here. If you happen to be near a mark cluster, I highly recommend taking it. Like this one gives us extra damage against marked enemies, which is nice to have a source of increasing our damage. But that isn't the reason I got this. The reason I got this is because this, I feel, is sadly necessary to have once you get into part 2 of the game. Enemies that have life regeneration, you need to be able to turn it off. Like, if you can't turn off an enemy's regeneration, then you should just avoid fighting them altogether. Like, it's not worth the effort to fight an enemy that has life regen once you get into part 2 of the game, because their regeneration is so overtuned that unless you are doing 10k DPS and up, then you most likely will not be able to kill the enemy. Like, you actually need to see something like 10k on your attacks. Obviously, I don't have that, but you don't need a ton of damage to be able to succeed in this game. But against enemies that have life regen, you need to be able to turn it off, or you're not going to be able to beat them without tremendous amounts of damage. Yeah, but this is actually like a really fun build. Like, I have had a lot of fun putting this together. As I mentioned, you don't need to have this this Koro amulet to do that. This unique amulet, all it does is it makes it that we're able to support this blessing more easily than you would be able to if you didn't have that. Oh, so an important thing on that, which I just realized I didn't go over when I was going over these. The whole reason that works is that they're here at the end here, Golemancer. I'm sorry, that's not where it is. It is here. Yes, here it is. Yeah, it's such an overpowered thing that I could have swore it was the last one. So in Leech of the Primordial, the second stanza there, summoned golems are resummoned 4 seconds after being killed. Yeah, that's the reason that you're able to do a loop with this. Because, like, after they die, like, they're just resummoned. So, like, and all of your golems will be resummoned with that. So you never have to worry about upkeep with your golems. The only thing you'd have to be worried about if you did happen to have this amulet. So this amulet is actually more of a detriment than it is a help when it comes to that. Because, again, it can actually mess up your... it can mess up, like, your golem grouping, because you may have noticed that sometimes, like, I would have like more of like one of the other kinds of golems than so instead of it always being 3 chaos golems, sometimes it would be 2 fire golems or 2 ice golems or 2 lightning golems. It will sometimes it'll just like happen like that, where like somehow, I don't know, the revive charge gets moved around or something. I don't know what causes it to happen, but I mean, like, occasionally, like, that'll happen. I'm guessing that, like, if you didn't have this, then you'd see it less often. It'd probably still happen, but it probably would be less frequent to have the resummoned golems go and be of a type that wasn't, that is a double of one of the ones you didn't want to have a double of. Because doubling your golems doesn't do anything for you. There's no value to it. Like, the physical damage reduction that is granted you by summoned chaos golems is not doubled by having more than one summoned chaos golem. Having the damage bonus from flame golem does not increase if you have more of them. Like stacking your golems does not improve the bonus they give you. It's just nice to have all of those bonuses up at the same time. And, if you've invested in here, then you have all of the bonuses. So an extra 100% effect of the buffs granted by your golems. 25% increased effect of buffs granted by your golem per summoned golem. So, so this does have, obviously this does play a role in increasing the efficacy of our golem buffs, since, the more golems we have, the more of that we have. But once again, you don't need to have this to run the build. And then in this cluster right here, you also increase the buffs of the golems. So, so massive increases to your golem buffs, and having all of those golems up at the same time, gives you some nice additional stats that aren't necessary but are very nice to have. And again, lets you be a lot freer in how you build the character. So you can see, I did this whole stat spread thing, not because I felt that it was something that would make the build better, but because I wanted to show how versatile you can be in the way you build this character. Because the only thing that you need to have if you want to run this character is to go here for the extra golem and the extra golem buff effect, and to be a elementalist, so you can go down this line here to grab the extra golem buffs and extra golems. Those are the only things you actually need for the build. Anything else is up to your flavor. You saw that I did a very cool new thing that is allowed because of the new returning projectile support gem that makes it that any projectiles are returned to you after you go out, which makes it that Wild Strike is now very cool. Wild Strike's always been an interesting skill, but the fact that you hit an enemy and then it fires. Well, I mean, it depends on what element gets chosen, but if the extra effect that happens when you hit with Wild Strike is usually only really good if there are enemies around the enemy that you're hitting with it. But with returning projectiles, now those extra effects are you saw the ice one that it hits the enemy, flies out, and then you saw them just flying back in. Very cool. And I supported that with elemental damage, with attack support, and prismatic burst. So we trigger a little damage nova every occasionally as we're hitting with our Wild Strike. So we're doing some decent damage, and we have all of our minions going and doing different things, honestly. So another reason why I chose the Chaos Golem as the one that is the blessing buffer is that by having multiple Chaos Golems, that kind of gives us an additional damage type that we don't have otherwise. Because since this is a full elementalist build, our Chaos Golem is doing physical damage. Not Chaos Golem. our Stone Golem is doing physical damage, and then our Ice, Lightning, and Fire Golem, and Flame Golem, are doing their respective elements of damage, which is why for them I have them being supported by Elemental Army. And the reason for this is that it's not for the increased elemental resistances, because those don't matter due to the Golemancer node here, which makes it that all of our golems are immune to elemental damage in general. So that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that with Elemental Army, any skills that our supported golems use that deal elemental damage cause exposure to that type of damage. And we have a skill that deals damage of a random elemental type of either fire, cold, or lightning. So these guys are just making it that this skill is more effective more often, which is the reason why I chose Elemental Army here. But as I mentioned, everything here is just flavoring. If you wanted to go all stone golems because you like stone golems, go for it. There's no reason not to. You want to go all flame golems, go for it. There is a ton of versatility in the way you can set up this particular character. The only thing to be sure of is that this is a much higher level build. So in order to have all of these and I grabbed Bastion of Elements for the additional damage mitigation. So it doesn't tell you here what it does, but the Primal Aegis, what that does is while it's up, it absorbs around, I think it's like 2300. Like you would have seen it on the top of the screen as during that gameplay section, but like it absorbs around 2300 elemental damage, and it recharges every 5 seconds. Like the amount is based on the number of allocated notable passives. So, you know, the more of these guys that you have, so you know, Arcanist Domination, Heart and Soul, Practical Application, Deep Wisdom, like these are all examples of notable passives. So the more of those you have, the more that Ascendancy passive absorbs. Yeah, but like, so I set this character up to be very tanky, since at this point in the game, you know, like you need to have your defenses right, and this character doesn't really have that much great stuff. I mean, obviously, like, you know, this shield has a lot of elemental resistances on it. Like a good amount of my elemental resistances are coming from the shield, but the shield itself isn't really a good shield. It has a tiny amount of energy shield and a little bit of armor, so it's not really doing much for us. You know, and so kind of funny. So like the only piece that we're wearing that actually gives us agility, not agility, evasion, is our helmet. So we're not really taking advantage of the fact that the only defense type that we've invested in is evasion. But yeah, but that's on me. That's not an issue with the build. It's an issue with me not wanting to put together another set of gear for this character. I'm also using Assassin's Mark as the mark for this character, which the only reason that I'm using Assassin's Mark and not something else, first off, it gives us a flat amount of increased crit chance, as well as a big multiplier to crit damage. Mind you, like the multiplier doesn't matter because we have elemental overload, but it is like the only reason I'm really using this. It isn't really because of the fact that it gives us increased chance to crit, or the chance to gain a power charge when killing an enemy that has the mark on them. The whole reason that I'm using this one is because I had this open blue slot. That's the only reason. You know, like most likely, like if I had really decided on my mark based on the way that this build works, I probably would have gone for Alchemist Mark. You know, if I had an open green, I probably would have gone for Alchemist Mark and use that instead. And the reason I would have used Alchemist Mark is that on hit you replenish your flash charges, and that's the only reason. Like there's more utility to that than to having a life leech or life on hit or crit with this character, because once again, you know, crit, we're only using our crit so that we get more damage from our elemental. You know, we get more elemental damage after we've dealt a crit. And that's the only thing crit is doing for us in this build. So having that, not a huge deal for us. You know, we get a large amount of increased crit chance because of our golem, and the weapon here has a 6% crit chance. And this is a crucible weapon that I made last league. So it has some increase, a little bit of increased cold damage, a little bit of attack speed, some mana regen, a little bit more maximum mana. But these two are the reason why I crafted this one. So it has a 6% chance to inflict Brittle and a 6% chance to inflict Scorch. And what Brittle does is it gives you increased crit chance against brittle enemies. And what Scorch does is it gives you Basically, elemental damage penetration. I mean, it's only a 6% chance on each, and we're giving up the ability to inflict ignite, freeze, or chill. But you know, it was an interesting change to how I use elemental ailments, and so I figured like I wanted to put that weapon together just to try it out with my elementalist when this D came around, and it's good. Like it's a decent weapon. It's not a hugely powerful weapon, but you know, I put it together for that utility, not for the amount of damage that it's capable of doing as a base. Although it does have some pretty good attack speed on it. Like 1.56 is actually pretty decent. As I pointed out, like, you know, the rest of my gear isn't really anything special. I mean, this has some armor and evasion. That's the only form of evasion we have in this build. So it's not really helpful. This has good armor on it and some okay energy shield. The fact that everything except the helmet has energy shield on it makes it that, you know, we have an okay amount of energy shield here. We're mostly, you know, dependent on our life. Defense wise, we have an okay amount of physical damage reduction. You know, not a great amount, but an okay amount. Our elemental resistances are almost all capped, with the exception of fire resistance, and then we're, you know, still a ways off on chaos, as is always the case. Yeah, but yep, but that's the build. Hopefully you found some of these tips useful for however it is that you're planning on building your characters, and are able to use some of these tips in the future, if not at the moment. But regardless, I hope you're enjoying the league. I hope you are enjoying the game. As I mentioned, this is one of my, actually it is my all-time favorite game, hands down. And I hope you've been enjoying whatever you have been playing. And if you're interested in more interesting build ideas, then, you know, stop on by on Monday. I'll have another lower level build video up to check out. And then next Friday, another one of these higher level builds that are more for the flavor than for anything substantial. Aside from that, have a great day. As always, Be Victus, Fires and Numeris, and bye.